Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever review on this channel. And as the title and thumbnail shows, as well as what you're looking at right now, this review is going to be about the brand new Disney Plus show, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, which is adapted from author Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson and the Olympians books. And I am someone who grew up with these books. I loved them basically growing up all throughout my elementary and middle school years. And I'd go so far as to say that they are better than the Harry Potter books in my mind. They have a much less controversial author, for one, but even then, the story has always felt deeper and more meaningful to me. And I know that overall, Harry Potter, of course, is much more popular, and a lot of the time these two series really get compared just because it's inevitable. They're some of our generation's most popular fantasy stories, but to me, Percy Jackson's always been really special. I always was just obsessed and so intrigued by Greek mythology, and Percy Jackson was my number one outlet for expressing myself and my love of Greek everything back then. So I was a stupid kid at the same time. Obviously, when I was reading these books for the first time, I loved them to death, and I thought anything associated with them was just bound to be perfect, flawless, and amazing. So when I watched the two movies of The Lightning Thief and The Sea of Monsters, I thought they were awesome. I had like minor things. I was like, they could have done this a little bit better. It wasn't like that in the books, but most of it, I was like, no, this is perfect. It's perfectly fine with me. It's not now. The movies were horrendous. Looking back on it with hindsight of a more developed consciousness and more critical thinking skills, they're awful. We all know they blatantly disrespected Riordan's vision for his characters and his story. So when I heard that the series was being rebooted, that it was going to Disney Plus, I had some mixed feelings. And it wasn't because Annabeth was black. And as you'll hear later in this review, the actress who plays Annabeth does a pretty good job, in my opinion, especially for a child actor. And it's something I feel like minor thing, but it's really hard to be a child actor. So I feel like we can't honestly judge a lot of the acting in this show the same way we do acting in major blockbusters and shows like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones. We just can't do that. But back on track. My honest thoughts after watching this series all the way through. I'm recording this just a half hour after I finished watching the finale. Is that I want to be hopeful, and I think that the show shows a ton of potential. And while I do think it falls flat in some points that we will be getting into later, I think it does show a lot of room to grow. So if you're someone who just wants to hear a quick little score out of 10, I would give Percy Jackson a 6.5 out of 10. And we will see why. And I hope you enjoy my review of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Season 1. So I want to start with a simple plot synopsis, whether you need a refresher, whether you're new to the series. Please do be aware, I'm going to have some minor spoilers here, but I think it's all to aid your understanding. So basically, Greek gods exist in our world, and Percy is an offspring of Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea. And after escaping multiple attempts on his life, barely, he makes it to a refuge camp for other demigods just like him. But he loses someone very close to him in the process. In doing so, however, he displays his first act of bravery in fighting a minotaur. And this is his first of many acts of selfless, reckless stupidity, but bravery. Meanwhile, his friend, Grover, who is attempting to lead him to the camp, is characterized as a screw-up, basically, and he wants to redeem himself. And he's lovable, he's adorable, but he's not too great at his job. And he wants to prove that he can be a supportive friend and someone who can protect demigods and lead them to safety while also being relied upon by his friends. When Percy arrives at camp, he meets Chiron, who is a centaur, and he half man, half horse, and he basically instructs Percy on some basics around the camp. He meets Dionysus, the god of wine, who is, I might say, amazingly casted, and he also meets a few major characters, Annabeth and Luke, and minor character in Clarice. Annabeth is very judgmental of Percy to begin with, and Luke and Clarice, in my mind, at least to start, they're both very one-dimensional, and they are like this in the books as well. Luke is very buddy-buddy with Percy. He's like defending him right out of the gate from Clarice, who just seeks to be a very one-dimensional bully. But Annabeth is the daughter of the goddess of wisdom, Athena, and as such, she's much more cautious around Percy, and she takes a while to just size him up. Until he's eventually introduced to some of the games around camp, like Capture the Flag, where he also shows his worth in fighting. So Percy's then given a quest about how Zeus's master bolt has been stolen, and how he and his reluctant friend in Annabeth and his screw-up friend in Grover have to come together, find Zeus's bolt before an all-out war between the gods start, and that's about it. So now I want to get into a few specific story beats that I have a little bit more to say about. And again, please be mindful. I got some more spoilers coming. But I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but in the second to last episodes, season 6, the trio visits the Lotus Casino in Las Vegas. This is a scene that a lot of book lovers in particular were very excited to see, because it's a really famous scene in the book. And I honestly thought it was pretty underwhelming. I think it was a very poor choice to have Hermes be very unhelpful to the trio, and it shows a kind of a lack of a possibility for redemption for Hermes, because he's characterized as a bad father to Luke, just from the little we know. So immediately, and in the books, Hermes wants to repair his relationship with his son, but the Hermes we see in the show, I I think is just someone who seems very self-centered and stuck up, and not as someone who wants to um, reunite with his son. And when the trio does mention that they're friends of Luke, we do see a little bit of a change in Hermes, but I think it would be more character accurate, because he agrees to hear them out, but he still doesn't help them. And I think it was a bad choice. I think he should have helped them, because his son is Luke, and he wants to do whatever he can by proxy to help Luke. And I'm, as far as I can remember, it's how it goes in the books. So I was a little bit, I shouldn't say a little bit, I was very disappointed. And moreover, in so doing, the casino basically traps our heroes for multiple days, and they miss their deadline to stop the war. And I think this is another poor choice by the show, because in the books, the heroes do not miss the deadline. It's down to the wire, but they end up doing it, and they stop the war. And in the show, they miss the deadline, but there's no repercussions for missing the deadline. Everything happens eventually, just as it does in the books. There's nothing really bad that happens. Zeus and Poseidon reconcile and agree to talk about the coming problems that are facing the gods. So there's no point in having them miss the deadline. And I think if they're going to have them do this, they need to show some real consequences. They need to show that war is actually coming. They need to depict that. And also so doing, they characterize our heroes as inadequate and irresponsible. And it's honestly not their fault, because they don't know how the casino works, and they get trapped, not of their own faults, I should say. But having our heroes miss the deadline is a poor narrative choice, in my opinion, because it characterizes them as heroes who ultimately were inadequate and who were not able to stop this war. Even though we don't see any real war happen, the fact that they miss it, I still think is just a poor narrative choice. I think it diminishes the way we should see our characters. The next thing I want to talk about, and I should also preface that I think a lot of the earlier episodes are fairly by the books. I don't have a lot to say about them, I'm sorry. And I think that's honestly just because the earlier parts of this show are either following the books pretty closely, and I don't have a whole lot to say about them, or they feel very Disneyified. And I feel like that's something that's hard to put into words, but we all understand what I'm saying when I say that the show is Disney-fied, and it really shows at times. It feels like there's something holding back. You've got stiff dialogue, you've got uninspired camera shots, you don't have a whole lot of interest in different color editing, and overall, it just always a lot of the time feels like something's lacking in the show, which is really unfortunate. Uh, but to continue, I disliked a lot of the penultimate episode where the trio go to the underworld. Um, and the immediate thing is when they're in the underworld, which takes about 5 minutes into the episode, they try and get in line to sneak into the underworld past Charon, the boatmaster, and Cerberus, the guard dog. And they get spotted and have to run away, and they use the flying shoes that Luke gives Percy earlier in the show to escape. And they just fly over a big wall to get onto the other side and into the underworld. And I was left watching that and basically going, why didn't we just fly over the wall to begin with? The underworld officers wouldn't know that the trio's there because they've snuck in. Now it can also be argued, Hades knows they're coming anyways. But we never hear our heroes say that, we know that Hades knows that we're coming. So the fact that our heroes just pussyfoot around for a while and then escape, it's all just to have a cheap chase scene, even though I loved seeing Cerberus, and a fake out death for Grover. And overall, it does not aid the story at all, especially because we just want to see our heroes complete the quest, get to the underworld, meet Hades, and continue the plot along. And I think this really messes with the pacing of the episode as well. And another thing about the underworld is I think its design just sucks. I think it sucks. I think having a vast majority of the landscape just being sand, it's just Tatooine. I think it looks awful. It's not how I think many others imagine the underworld at all. And our heroes visit the underworld numerous times throughout the multiple series that Riordan has written, and I've never imagined the underworld as just sand. It's just sand as far as the eye can see, with a little bit of a creepy forest scene where Annabeth just gets thrown out of the plot, which also sucks, but I'm not going to linger on that too long. I don't even understand why they decide to kick Annabeth out of the plot halfway through. It doesn't make any sense to me, especially because they all reach Hades' castle together in the books. I don't understand that. And when they finally meet Hades, I think his castle kind of sucks. It looks intimidating on the outside. Then we get in and it just looks like a modern home. But I feel like Hades is going for like an edgy modern home kind of feel. And I again don't really think it's translated well in the show. And I don't think that he himself commands anywhere near as much mysterious power as he should, being God of the Dead. I didn't think the one scene we get with Hades in this entire series so far, I did not think it was good. I wasn't intimidated by him. I thought Percy kind of just kicked him around with his own words. And Percy's a 12-year-old. And Percy's job is to make fun of the gods to their faces, but especially to the God of the Dead, I really don't think Percy should get away with it this easily. And the reason he gets away with it is because Hades just feels weak. He doesn't command respect like I think he should. And now we have to get to the biggest problem I have with this episode, which is Percy finding the bolt in his backpack, which I just don't understand. Once he finds out that he has Zeus's master bolt, and he finds this out when he has not reached Hades' castle yet, I don't understand why he doesn't leave the underworld immediately and get the bolt back to Olympus as soon as possible to stop this war. Because as we've seen, as we haven't seen, but as we have been told, war is going to start now and troops are being marshaled by Poseidon and Zeus. So Percy's number one goal in mind, the Percy we have seen grow, has grown from just hot-headed and arrogant to still brash, but he's thinking more logically, and he has a big picture in mind. He wants to stop the war. He knows that's his quest. He accepts that that is his main goal. He has accepted that saving his mother comes secondary as much as he wants to save her, and he keeps going anyways. And he wastes valuable time where people could be dying up back on Earth and to go and talk to Hades. I think, again, this just misunderstands Percy as a character. The Percy we know should immediately leave and go and stop the war, and then be back down to the underworld to save his mother, because he leaves the episode not being able to save his mom anyways. And the only reason we have Percy still go to Hades' castle after he knows he has the bolt is so we can find out that Hades is also missing his Helm of Darkness, which the characters don't know. And it's painfully obvious that the writers moved this and pushed this themselves so that Percy would get there, and then we would have another element to the plot that Hades is not the thief, but Hades has also had something stolen from him. And in the books, Percy doesn't know he has the bolt until he actually gets there, and then he's horrified to also find out that Hades is missing his home. So, again, a fatal misunderstanding of the source material, which I think really harms the penultimate episode. Now, I don't want to trash on the episode too much, because there were some things that I really liked, but that mostly culminates in the final shot. And that is Ares walking towards the trio with his massive fucking greatsword as he stares the three of them down, and Percy draws Riptide and looks him dead in the eye. I loved it, and I loved how the episode ended with that. No words, just looks, and a drawing of swords, and an understanding of what's about to happen. I thought that was perfect. But unfortunately, I think it's the only perfect part of the episode, and it's the only perfect part of an episode that has a vast amount of flaws that really hold it back from hyping us up for the finale. And it's left to this final scene to really get us excited. And I hope the writers learn from this penultimate episode that they need to have a strong penultimate episode all around. You can't just leave the last scene to do all of the heavy lifting, because that's not how you write a strong narrative. Alright, so now, after some of the ups and downs that were episode 7, mostly downs in my opinion though, we came to the finale. And I think overall this finale is fairly harmless, fairly by the book, keeps to the book, and overall unremarkable mostly, but still effective. I want to start with, of course, the thing that we basically cliffhangered on in episode 7, which was Ares strolling up to the trio, which I thought was an awesome shot to end off. I love how quickly Percy is ready to just kick Ares' ass, just fuck him up. He wants it. He wants the smoke. And Ares wants the smoke too. In the challenging to single combat, I think is all very well acted. I think it works really well. The only problem I have with it is that the fight just seems like it's very short. It seems like Percy struggles for a little while, then he realizes he can use the waves close by, and then he just cuts Ares. I feel like I would have loved if it lasted just a little bit longer, but I did love the cutting in between of Luke training with Percy and showing Percy how to actually wield a sword, because we don't get much of any of that up until this point in the show, which is another thing I should mention. We get very little of Percy actually sword fighting until the end. That's the same way it is in the books pretty much, and I think that's good. I think it keeps our character human. I think that it keeps him human and keeps him not all powerful. I think it keeps Percy human, down to earth, that he's able to be killed, that he's not an expert swordsman yet, and it keeps the fight tense. So I really enjoyed the Ares fight. And then I like how immediately we transition into Percy returning Hades' Helm of Darkness, to the same Fury that has been attempting to kill him for the entire show. I really like that. It's a fun little interaction. However, the jump cut that follows after, I'm not the biggest fan of. I don't like that Percy immediately just kind of appears in New York in the Empire State Building. But I do like the funny little where he says, I'm here to go to Olympus, and the desk clerk is basically like, what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck? Holy shit. And I think the first shot of Olympus as the gates open is pretty awe-inspiring. And as for our main man, Zeus, Lance Reddick does an amazing job at Zeus, commands just absolute power. But he takes some serious sass from Percy, which I also like. I think it's very true to Percy's character to be just done with all the bullshit. And then how Zeus's quick temper makes him turn around, how he's feeling merciful, and then how he goes to strike Percy, and Poseidon shows up to save his son. And the interaction of Zeus gloating and Poseidon having to give in, nice little brotherly interaction there. I really like that. And then when Zeus leaves, I think the interaction we get with Percy and Poseidon is one of the most wholesome interactions in the whole show. How Percy's final question is just asking about his mother to Poseidon. And it's obvious what Poseidon's answer is, but he sends Percy back anyways. And I think that was a very effective cut, edit, everything. When we get back to camp and our trio is wary of Clarice, and then of course Luke's betrayal, juxtaposing everything we thought, that the daughter of Ares was the villain. Oh no, she's not. I think Luke's betrayal, though, is better handled in the books. I enjoyed a lot more that it was just him and Percy in the books, at least as far as I can remember. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But just having Percy and Luke there, and in the books when Luke poisons Percy and leaves him for dead, it was pretty damn dark for a book whose main character is 12 to 13. And I'm not a big fan that Annabeth is there to also hear the truth about Luke's plan to join Kronos. I don't really like that. Should have just been a Percy and Luke moment. We needed more just Percy and Luke hammering home their friendship. I think Annabeth spoils the scene a little bit. But their final trio interaction between Grover, Percy, and Annabeth is, again, inoffensive. It's wholesome. Percy's final scene with his mother, however, is even more wholesome, more hopeful, ends on a better note. I really like Percy's monologue at the end. I think it all works very well. So overall, this finale is effective, but there is nothing that is truly memorable besides the interactions with Poseidon. I think that is definitely the highlight of the episode on Olympus, which unfortunately doesn't last very long. It's just about 5 minutes. But I think still that is what leaves the biggest impression on the viewer. So finale, 6 out of 10. I don't want to bore everybody, but I want to talk in depth about this. And I feel like movies and TV, too often, reviews that I see on YouTube, they're cut too much. They don't talk about enough. They don't go in depth enough. They don't go that extra mile that I really want to see. So let's get into the characters. Percy Jackson is a headstrong, suicidal, self-sacrificial little boy. But sometimes he's even made out to be an idiot. Other times he's made out to be a complete genius. And I think sometimes the show struggles with this. They don't know whether they want Percy to know everything about Greek mythology or have everything about Greek mythology explained to him, often by Annabeth. But a bright side of his character is that he obviously has a lot of room to grow. He shows a lot of growth during some of the underworld scenes, but I think he's lacking in dynamic character points at the moment. I think the finale, having the finale under my belt, his little season 1 character arc brings it around pretty nice and neat. And he's shown some good growth in this season. He's learned that he can't do everything himself. That's the point of book 1, Percy. He can't do everything himself. He can't just fight the monsters on his own. But I think this lesson is repeated a few too many times in the show. I think they kind of jump around with that, whether they want Percy to really believe that himself or not. So I think we're going to see, if season 2 gets renewed, that Percy actually sticks to this. At least I really hope we do. But Percy Jackson is still one of the best literary characters I've ever read, I've ever had the privilege of reading, and I think he has a massive amount of potential to go great distances with his show, and his actor shows a ton of promise. I think as a child actor, he is one of the best I have seen. I can't praise Walker Scobell enough. I think he had some growing pains in the first 2 episodes. His acting was, to be honest, I found it kind of cringy, but I think he really came into his own as the series went on. I definitely can say that. He was easily my most favorite character to watch. I love the way he sasses Zeus in the final episode. That was probably my favorite moment for him throughout the entire series. Either that or his duel with Ares, but either way, I'm looking up with this version of Percy. The next character, obviously, that I want to get into is Annabeth Chase, who's played by Leah Jeffries. And I think she was also very well casted. I don't care that Annabeth is black. Riordan doesn't care that Annabeth is black. This is a mute point. I don't want to linger very long on it. Doesn't really matter the race of any of our characters. It really matters just the performance that they can bring. And I think she does a really good job a lot of the time. I don't like how she functions a lot of the time as just an exposition dump for Percy and by proxy the audience. I think that's a little bit of a weak way to build your world. I think dialogue needs to come more naturally, and I think a lot of the time when we're world building, it's just Annabeth saying, Percy, you're stupid, you didn't know X. On the brighter side, I think she has a really effective alluded to relationship with her mother Athena, how they don't speak to each other. We don't linger on it long, but it hits pretty hard. You see the pain that she's going through, where Percy is getting all the support from his dad all of a sudden, even though he hasn't met him. Poseidon seems to be following the group along their entire quest, and Annabeth has this estranged relationship with her mother, and she's honestly jealous of Percy for as well as her birth father, who has married a new woman and does not welcome Annabeth into their family at all, which is why Annabeth ran away and found camp in the first place. I think Annabeth in this story overall in season 1 hasn't had a lot of moments to grow for herself. This is the Percy show for now. It's Percy Jackson and the Olympians. And again, I think just like Percy, she's fairly one-dimensional, more so than Percy himself because he's the main character. He's obviously going to get the most development. But she also has a lot of room to grow, and I'm also hopeful to see her grow up and become a really, really good Annabeth. Because what I see happening is if the show continues to get renewed and each book is adapted, we're going to have kind of a Harry Potter effect where we see these actors grow with each installment, and we see just how much chemistry they have with each other and how skilled of actors they really are. So I'm looking up for Annabeth. Now we need to get into Grover. And unfortunately, Grover is my least favorite of the 3 in this show. And he's also my least favorite of the 3 in the books. Not that I have a whole lot against book Grover. I do have a little bit more against show Grover. But he's never a bad character, except in the movies, of course. The actor who plays him was just made into a caricature. But here, I think Grover's pretty watered down. And it sucks. It's been a while since I've read the books, but he comes off to me as even more timid than his book self. But just like Annabeth, I don't have a whole lot to say. Unfortunately, not as much to say as about Grover as I do about Percy. I think Grover's pretty basic. My favorite scene of his, however, was his conversation with Ares, where he basically fanboyed to Ares and had a lot of us fooled that he had fooled Ares, even though we find out that Ares was ultimately playing them. I think it was a good moment for Grover because he showed just how much he knows, with how much he impresses Ares with what he knows about the wars Ares has started. I think that was a really nice bit of character building for Grover. All right, now it's going to be a little more of a lightning round. We've knocked out our big 3. Let's go through just a few of the other major minor characters in the show. I don't even really know how to characterize them exactly because a lot of them don't have a lot of screen time here. I want to start with Sally Jackson, though, Percy's mom. I think she does an amazing job. I think this actress is giving her heart and soul into playing a mother who is just torn apart by the way her son is not being his own fault and how badly she wants to just do everything she can to help him, but the pain she's going through knowing that she ultimately has very little power to protect him when he ultimately grows up and monsters come to try and kill him. I think she feels incredibly human, especially when we get our flashbacks with young Percy and how just angry he seems. He just seems so full of rage and resentment towards his mother, and we see her struggle with this. At least she leaves the table in the diner with Percy to go and cry, and I thought it was one of the most hard-hitting moments in the entire show, and just demonstrating how much pain this woman is going through, but how much she loves her son and how much she's staying with him because she ultimately loves him more than anything and will do anything to protect him. And going off of this scene, I think we get a really nice introduction to Poseidon when she calls on him and he arrives and they speak together. This is the first time we see them speak. Percy's probably 6 or 7, and ultimately ends with Sally asking Poseidon if he wants to meet Percy. And Poseidon, unfortunately, he declines because he knows it's ultimately safer for his son that he does not meet him yet. But I think a lot of their conversation together, how much Poseidon praises Sally for how hard she's fighting, it shows that Poseidon really does love Sally. I think with how little screen time this relationship is given, I'm surprised just how strong the writers were able to make these two characters' connection feel. I am honestly very impressed by it. And Poseidon himself, I think he's very well cast. And in the final episode, I love his conversation with his son. I love how it doesn't linger for very long, how Percy is just awestruck by his presence, and then they have a bit of just a father-son bonding moment before Poseidon sends him back to his mother. I think ultimately no complaints here. I want to also speak briefly about a few of the other Olympian gods. As I stated before, Hades, I thought he was fairly underwhelming. I think he'll have more time in future seasons, but Hades doesn't play a major role in this first set of books, and by proxy these first seasons. I don't think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of him, and I think his introduction wasn't handled very well. Another god we need to talk about is Ares, and I like that he's not just a big dumb brute. I think in the books he's characterized very much as a dumb brute, and while both his book and show versions ultimately trick the demigods, this Ares seems more conniving and scheming, and I kind of like it because I don't like how Ares is always just the big dumb brute who wants to kill people. I like that he has a little bit more of a thought about him, and I think honestly that is an accurate Ares to Greek mythology. I don't think Ares in Greek mythology is meant to be interpreted as a dunce. I think he is smart. I think he's also just overshadowed by Athena, who is ultimately smarter than him and more strategic, but I don't think Ares is an idiot in and of himself, and I like that he shows that he resents just how much praise Athena gets for being the smart one when he has some intelligence in his own rights, and I really like it. And the last god I want to talk about is Zeus. And rest in peace to Lance Reddick, because I think he plays a really, really good version of Zeus. And we have one scene with him, and it's just awful that Lance Reddick passed away and that Zeus will have to be recast, because I thought Lance Reddick brought a really, really powerful aura as the god of thunder, and I'm very disappointed that we will not be seeing him again. But for his one scene, I thought Reddick played a stellar Zeus. I thought he commanded absolute respect and power. I liked that Percy pushed and poked him, and Zeus turned on his heel to strike him, that Zeus was not taking any shit. It reminds me of a scene in Force Awakens when Poe Dameron is captured by the First Order and he talks to Kylo Ren. He just jokes around with Kylo Ren, and Kylo Ren doesn't do anything to put Poe in his place. He lets Poe just jaw at him, and then he has his men stow Poe on the ship, and he just keeps going. And I think that shows that, and like in that scene, that Kylo Ren is not a villain to be feared. And I ultimately think at least Zeus in Greek mythology is a villain, because Zeus is an awful person. In the show, I don't think Zeus is the villain. Zeus is not the book villain. He's not the ultimate evil. That's Kronos. But your authoritative power in a scene needs to express that power on the character that does not have that power, and I like that Zeus doesn't put up with Percy's bullshit for very long. I think that was a very effective choice, and a great casting, and a rest in peace to Mr. Lance Reddick once again. Alright, now to wrap it all up, I want to briefly summarize my thoughts on Percy Jackson and the Olympians and go about some basic theme work and book accuracy. So, to start, I think the book accuracy of the show is mostly inoffensive. Lotus Casino could have been better, trio dynamics were fine, Sally Jackson was very good, and Percy's hero qualities are already beginning to show. As for themes, I want to briefly touch on just a few of them. One is that just one person can't always be a hero. One person can't always solve everything on their own, and the drastic differences between people are often what make relationships stronger and success more likely, which is what our trio learns as they go about their journey. Everyone has their own motivations and what makes them tick. For instance, Luke and his anger at his father, and Ares and his love of conflict. Ares and his love of war is what gets him to sign on for Kronos. That's the plain and simple of it. He just likes to cause problems. Luke, any mention of his father turns him sour, and that's what partially turns him to joining Kronos, is the fact that he's constantly angry at his father. And the overarching theme that Riordan tries to go for is that the gods are terrible parents. And this story functions as a call out for poor parenting in our world, which is juxtaposed with how effective and loving and compassionate a parent like Sally is, who's a single mother who would do anything for Percy, including just getting fucking crushed by a minotaur. I mean, if your mom would get crushed by a mythological beast for you, you got a pretty damn good mom. And now, just to briefly summarize my thoughts, I give Percy Jackson, again, a 6.5 out of 10. This is not a bad score, as you will see with upcoming reviews. This is a harmless show that pretty much anybody can enjoy. Just sit back and watch. But there's nothing that truly is groundbreaking in this first season, but it does still get me excited for what's to come. It's just like watching the first Harry Potter movie and going, alright, by book 5 or book 4, this is really gonna get good. Thank you, Percy Jackson, for at least giving hope to literary adaptations once again. We've been in a severe drought right now, and we needed something like this. So I'm very hopeful for the future of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you stick around for more of the Screen Saga.